Right, hello everyone. Welcome back to Remember the Regulars. I'm your host Chris. I've just been out on site today. So yeah, I'm currently working on I write reports, archaeological reports for a living at the minute. And I've just spent a nice wet day out on site, looking at holes in the ground. And on the way back, I got stuck in traffic on the A14 thanks to the two of the carriageways been flooded, and while I was stuck in that traffic, I thought that when I get back home, I'll do something a bit more, just something to kind of share it and spread a bit more knowledge. So I thought I'd just give you an introduction to some of my recommended source of information on the regular and territorial army as they were deployed in the home forces, as well as the Commonwealth forces and the Free forces. So surprisingly, there were actually very few published accounts of the role of the home forces. You know, especially when you compare it to the vast number of books about the Home Guard, which focus solely on the Home Guard but never put them in context. Um, and there are also a vast amount of unreliable and very poor source of information. So I thought to kind of spread some reliable and useful information that I use in my research and obviously reference properly rather than just quoting verbatim and pretending the work's my own. I thought I'd just go through some of my favourite sources of information that are relatively readily available. So I thought what we'd do is start with some books and other sources of information that focus on the national picture. So what we thought we'd do is go from national to more specialised and personal accounts, and then look at some localised accounts, which are well worth getting if you have a serious interest in this period and want to learn more. So starting off, I recommend first of all getting a copy of Stopping Hitler by Captain G.C. Wynne. This was pretty much the official account of the defence of the UK during the Second World War. And this was published relatively shortly after the Second World War as well. But this is a reprint, and this was available online a couple of years back for something like £2, and I bought it because I thought, well, if it's crap, it's £2. It's not a loss. But yeah, this is probably the best introduction that you can find to this period, and it considers, everything in context. It's not just banging on about the Home Guard and spreading myths and all this. It does a really good job of outlining the defence of the UK. What's also cool about this is it has a vast amount of information in a series of appendices in there, which you can use to cross-reference and use as an additional source of information. So most of the book is actually comprises of these various appendices. But yeah, if you want a kind of very quick and easy to understand introduction to the various aspects of the defence of the UK during the Second World War, then I recommend this. It covers, like I say, on a more national scale. If you want something, well, I recommend getting a copy of that, having a read. And then if you want something that's a bit more detailed, a bit more in depth, then next stop would be The Defence of the United Kingdom by Basil Collier. Again, this was a source of information published, I think, in the 1950s. So again, not too far after the end. Yeah, 1957 this was first published. And again, this is another kind of official account as well of the defence of the UK during the Second World War. What's cool about this one is it covers literally everything from the naval aspect, the RAF and the Air Force, as well as the on the ground aspects, so the infantry and all that. But this one is extremely detailed. I haven't read this cover to cover. I use it as more of a reference book, but it does provide you with a series of really, really good maps, a really decent chronology of the defence of the UK during the Second World War, and is an absolute recommended source of information. So yeah, I recommend this. Again, this has been reprinted. The reprint's very good, has all the information in there, but if you can find an original copy, I recommend doing it because a lot of the maps you find in the original were fold-out maps that were extremely useful. Today, funnily enough, these maps are often sold online without the book, and you see these photocopies of these maps copied and shared on Facebook and elsewhere, often verbatim with no form of referencing or sourcing as to where they came from, but they're more often copied from this book without the vast wealth of information. So yeah, once you've had a read through Stopping Hitler, then move on to something a bit more chunky. with the defence of the United Kingdom. Next up, we have one of my favourite sources of information, which is extremely difficult to find, and that is Colin Dobinson's 20th Century Fortifications in England, Volume 2, Anti-Invasion Defences of World War II. So this is extremely hard to find. I used to work for the CBA, and I got their entire reference collection of these reports. So yeah, the physical copies are extremely difficult to find. There are PDF copies available, and if you have a chat with the Council for British Archaeology, then they might be able to provide you with a PDF copy of this report, potentially for a small donation. But have a chat with them, and they might be able to provide you with a copy. This is literally the best source of information in regards to the archaeology and the history of the anti-invasion defence of the Second World War. It's fully referenced throughout. It relies solely on primary sources, which is a rarity for the anti-invasion defences. You get a lot of speculation, a lot of bullshit online. Based on, with no factual basis. Oh, great, Pepper's going for a poo. Thank you, Pepper. There she is in the background. Thanks, Pepper. That's just what I wanted. So this provides a really good statistical analysis of the source of information. It provides full references, so this is a really good source of information to have if you are serious about investigating the Second World War anti-invasion defences and want to do your own research in terms of going to the National Archives. So you cannot go wrong with this. I recommend a copy for any serious historian or archaeologist who has a genuine interest in this period of the Second World War. And it's a shame this was never properly published, because this was written in 1996 and would have helped to quash many of the myths that are commonplace nowadays, such as the number of pillboxes built and who built them and the myths about how they were demolished and all this stuff. It would have completely, demolished that early on and set us on a better footing than we have. Also provides a decent background to proper pillbox typology as well, and how best to classify pillboxes, where today everything's lumped into 7 or 8 types, which has hampered preservation immensely and continues to do so. This preempted that in the mid-90s, and it's kind of like, called out a lot of the crap behaviour we see today. So Colin Dobinson's 20th Century Fortifications in England, Volume 2, Anti-Invasion Defences of World War II. If you can get a copy of that, absolutely fantastic piece of work, especially one considered alongside the other 2 sources I've already mentioned. Right, now let's look at the national picture one last time, and I'm going to plug a book which isn't actually out yet, but I'm going to do that by plugging Andy Chatterton's Britain's Secret Defences. So personally, I haven't read this yet. I'm going to get round to reading it, and it's apparently very good. But I'm going to use this as the segue for an upcoming book that Andy is currently writing, that he's been extremely generous in giving me a preview of, and I've done some proofreading on it for him. And I don't know the title of his upcoming book, but it's going to be a book that looks at the UK-wide picture in terms of home defence. So it's going to look at the air war, the war at sea, the anti-invasion defence of the country. But most importantly, it's going to provide a really nice introduction to the truth behind these defences, instead of the focus solely on the Home Guard and, to a certain extent, the sexy stuff, the secret armies. It's going to put all that into context. And from what I've read of it, it's a really, really nice read. I don't know when it's going to be published, but I thought I'd give that a plug, before it comes out, so that it hits the ground running. Because, like I say, I read through the various chapters associated with the land war, and it's such a good read. Oh, sorry, my little vitamin D lamp has gone off, which I used to illuminate my face. It's going to be an absolutely tremendous book. It reads so nicely. It's well written. It analyzes the situation on the ground properly. It doesn't just focus on a small aspect. It puts everything into context, and it's going to be an absolutely amazing source of information when it does finally drop. So hopefully that'll come out this year. If not, keep an eye out for it. It's absolutely fantastic. So in my previous video, I went on about the role of the Commanders-in-Chiefs of Home Forces. So my next source of information are actually the personal accounts of 2 of the Commander-in-Chiefs of Home Forces. The first of these is General Edmund Ironside. So his war diary is worth getting. It gives you an insight into his thoughts and how he planned to defend the country in the Second World War, and it dispels a lot of the myth and bullshit that we see today about how he was, solely focused on static defence. This makes it abundantly clear his frustrations in terms of the lack of equipment he had and the defence that he wanted to put forward, which he couldn't do because of this lack of equipment. And it, like I say, completely kiboshes the load of crap that you see online on a daily basis that denigrates him and the efforts he put into defending the country. So this is the Ironside Diaries. This is an original copy that I found, published in the 1960s. And yeah, it's, what is it called? Sorry, yeah, the Ironside Diaries, 1937 to 1940. This was edited by Colonel Roderick MacLeod and Dennis Kelly. I don't know if this has been reprinted. If not, try and find an original copy. You can get it online relatively cheaply, but that is a vital source of information. And like I say, it gives you a better insight into the man himself and how he was thinking. So yeah, get a copy of that. I don't know if General Kirk had a war diary published. If he did, I'm not aware of it, but something like that would be worth getting as well. Coming on to the the person who took over from Ironside, you have the war diaries of Alan Brooke. So these are worth getting as well. These are relatively well known. You can pick up this copy relatively cheaply. Again, gives you an insight into Alan Brooke's thoughts, General Alan Brooke's thoughts while he was the Commander-in-Chief of Home Forces. Gives you an idea of how he saw Ironside's plan and how he saw best to defend the country, and it gives you a lot of the much needed context for his switch from the defensive stop lines established by Ironside and why he stopped building those and focused more on nodal points, which again were established by Ironside, and also gives an insight into his thoughts on defence in terms of available resources as well. So that is well worth getting a copy of that too. So that is War Diaries 1939 to 1945, Field Marshal Lord Alan Brooke, which was edited by Alex Danchev and Daniel Todman. So yeah, you can get a copy of that relatively easily. So coming on to more localized case studies. So yeah, again, there are very, very few reliable, let's say, localized case studies. You find some books are focused on the local picture, but generally these are just like gazetteers and lists of sites with no real context or useful information, and have very little in the way of archive research backing them up. So generally they consist of a lot of opinion, which is based on, well, the author's opinion rather than any actual facts. So if you're after a more localized case study, I can recommend, without a doubt, If Hitler Comes by Gordon Barclay, Professor Gordon Barclay. He's been absolutely fantastic in, providing me with information. And this book, which focuses on the preparations for defending Scotland against invasion in 1940, is absolutely second to none. Extremely well researched, well written, just sets out how things should be done at a local level. Just absolutely fantastic book, and well worth sourcing. Yeah, absolutely fantastic piece of work that. And one of my go-to source of information in terms of how to present and how to research the anti-invasion defences. So, on that same vein, looking at a more localized level, so looking at a county level in this in this case, Suffolk, we've got A Very Dangerous Locality, which is by Robert Lydiard and David Sims. So this looks at the county of Suffolk during the Second World War. Again, vastly impressive piece of work. Looks at everything in context from the Julius Caesar plan all the way through to searchlight batteries, and things like that. It's an absolutely fantastic piece of work, and it also looks at the preparations for the invasion of France during Operation Crucian, I think it was. And again, another example of how localized case studies should be researched and put together. Absolutely fantastic body of work. So yeah, these two get my recommendation for if you are looking to do like a county or a more localized case study into the anti-invasion defense of the Second World War, this is how to do it. These should act as the basis for all study and how that study should be presented in written form. One thing I missed out in terms of the national picture is I haven't got a physical copy of this, but you can find a dissertation, a PhD thesis from I think from the 1980s, which was titled "British Planning and Preparations to Resist Invasion on Land, September 1939 to September 1940." And this is by David Anthony Newbold. You can find this online. I'll put a link in the chat or the description below to this. And again, this is one of the very few sources of information, reliable sources of information, although there is a fair bit of opinion in it. He's a bit of a Kirk fanboy, I think. I think that was the chap he talked to. But again, vital piece of information in terms of looking at the national picture and the distribution of units in the UK within the Home Forces in the period September 1939 to September 1940. And you can find that online. So that's free source of information. But the key thing here is if you're using these sources of information, don't just copy out them verbatim and copy and paste the information online and try to make yourself look clever. Always quote your sources. There is a vast amount of this going on online. It's plagiarism, where people just copy snippets out of other people's work and try to make it out as if it's their own. And this has created in the past and continues to create today a lot of problems in terms of the reliability of information. So people just copy something they've read online or elsewhere, and that kind of snowballs into the formation of myths. So this is one of the reasons why the farmers were paid a fiver to demolish pillboxes myth has taken off, is because people read something in one place, don't question it, and then copy it verbatim. Someone else copies it, and these myths get established as fact when you can demolish these myths relatively quickly just by reading the original source or doing your own research. So yeah, if you do read these sources, always provide links to the sources you are quoting from. Right, if you're really hardcore and you want to start looking at the units deployed in the UK themselves and work out which units were where, I recommend Orders of Battle of the Second World War. So this just covers the British Army. It doesn't cover the Germans, the Nazis, or any other units. It just covers the British Army. But this was prepared by Lieutenant Colonel H.F. Joslin and is a vital source of information if you are, again, serious about researching the units within a given area. So it provides, let's just give you a quick preview of this. Find one that's going to be a bit more useful. No, not that. That's an appendices. God, where are we? Sorry. Jesus, you'd think I'd use this a bit more. So looking at the 59th Staffordshire Infantry Division, this provides a list of all the units that were within that division, the dates of which when they were in the division, for example. So this is particularly useful if you're looking through like a corps war diary or a command war diary, and it says something like, "Oh, the 59th Infantry Division were here." Then you can use this book to cross-reference which units comprise that division, and then use that to identify the war diaries in the National Archives. So this is a vitally important piece of information. So this book can be relatively expensive. I think it's about 30, 40 pounds. But if you're serious, it's worth getting a copy of that. And then one final source of information is the National Archives. So the National Archives hold the Home Forces War Diaries, which are under, which one is it? They are under the files, I think it's W0166. Let me just check that because I know that's going to be wrong. Yeah, so the War Diaries in the National Archives for the Home Force are kept under the file heading W0166, and then you also have the files for the command files in the National Archives under W0199. This is where you'll find the vast amount of information, primary source information, in regards to the Home Forces. And if you've got the time to go to the National Archives yourself, do. It takes a bit of detective work to identify the war diaries and the files themselves. But if you're using, Joslin and Dobinson, then you can find those sources of information relatively easily. It's just a matter of going to the National Archives and sourcing those war diaries. And not just looking at the pretty pictures and the maps, but actually reading the information and digesting that information, because there's a vast amount of information, particularly in the war diaries, which is useful to better understand the actual landscape of defence and how things were to be defended. And in that respect as well, there are also independent researchers that you can hire who offer a service to go to the archives on your behalf and photograph copies. So I've used several researchers, and I recommend. So I want to mention my friend Mike, but I don't know if he does this. You know, I don't want him to get swamped with requests to get war diaries if he's too busy. So I won't. Sorry, Mike, I won't. I won't give you a plug, unfortunately. But if you want me to in a future video, let me know and I'll give you a plug. But if you're on Facebook and Twitter, I recommend the British Army War Diary Copying Service. So Andy, who runs that, is in the archives relatively frequently. His service has a very quick turnaround, extremely reasonable costs involved for copying the war diaries. And if you're a fair distance away from the National Archives, it's very, very cost effective to check him out and contact him. So I'm not going to quote his price online because they might change in the future. But check out the British Army War Diary Copying Service. I'll post a link in the description as well to that webpage on Facebook. And yeah, absolutely vital source of information. And yeah, it makes it a lot easier for you to get the source of information from the National Archives if you're miles away. Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of like my little reading list. My recommended source of information, like I said, there's a surprising lack of information out there, or lack of reliable information, unfortunately. And there's, I've got a lot of books that kind of focus on this, but I don't recommend very many of them, unfortunately. These are the ones that I recommend getting. In the future, I might update this. If anything, any more books come out that are of use and I recommend spending money on. Just give a bit of a quick plug for UK Second World War Heritage. So on the UK Second World War Heritage website, you'll find the Home Forces resources. Check out those if you want to get an idea of which units were where in July 1940 and other sources of information. I'll post a link to that in the description as well. But yeah, that's been reading time with Chris. I hope you found that useful. And yeah, I might update this video in the future with more source of information. But yeah, I'm off to get myself some food and get warmed up after being on site all day. See you later. Thank you very much and goodbye.